Oh, I thought you said 5. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Kingdom. You guys will hear me refer to our producer Goalie a lot in the background. He'll be talking to me. And if he says anything funny, I'm going to share it with you. Me and Icon are doing a preview show or prediction show, however you want to call it, for the London event coming up this weekend. Demon, thank you for the follow right as the stream started. I do have some new emotes you guys might see in the chat, depending if some subs come through or if you subscribe. And if you follow, I'll call you guys out as the show goes on. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the show, we're going to do something called First Five, which basically is just a way for us to introduce ourselves every week, but in a different way, so it's not lame. So I'm going to start with you, Icon. Basically, your name, what you do in the community, your content, kind of what you do on your content. And then if you could be an animal with superpowers, what animal and what superpower would you have? So you have to combine the two.
I like it. All right. So Icon, you can find me on YouTube, Icon Nation. And essentially what I do is I just take gameplay. So I take scrims and then I put a little map like up in the corner. And then while that map's up there, like a mini map, I'll draw on top of it. So you guys can see strategies. I'll break down the strategies. I'll see, I'll say like why somebody's overtaking a hill or why somebody's flanking or what's going on with hard points, stuff like that. I know a game like this, especially since they went to 5 people, it can be really hard to follow. So I just wanted to take that and just break it down. And that's what I put on my channel. So if you're ever confused what's happening, why it's happening, anything like that, you can find some breakdowns on my channel. So if I could be an animal and a superpower. So I've never actually seen these combined before. So everybody, I mean, of course, everybody's, you've been asked 1,000 times what animal you could be. So I've always said a falcon just because I want to go as fast as I can go. So I would probably mix being a falcon with, I don't know, maybe the power to go invisible. You can go basically wherever you want to go as fast as you could go. And if you were invisible, nobody could see you. So that would be my combination, those two.
All right.
I don't know if it makes much sense, but that's what I would pick.
An invisible falcon.
Yeah, dude, that'd be sweet.
Well, I mean, whatever your prey was, they would never see you coming. Like,
exactly. I wouldn't have to worry about anything.
Down on them. Okay, so my name is Kingdom. This is my channel that you guys are watching this on, and I've been in the community for a long time, in and out. I was gone for about 3 years. I used to do a show on this channel. Thank you, Phantom, by the way, for the subscription. I appreciate it. Welcome to the kingdom. And I'd make YouTube videos about Call of Duty. I made one today that we may talk about later on the show, talking about the controversy over whether or not these home events, these weekends, should count as championships. If I was an animal, I'm going to say an eagle because it's better than a falcon. No, I'm just joking. I'm going to say an eagle because I like how high they fly. And like, even I see bald eagles a lot in Washington because I live in Washington, but they're so high up in the sky, you rarely ever see them close to the ground. They're not like pigeons that are like basically crawling on the ground. And so I would want to be an eagle. And man, I would say invisibility too, but I don't want to steal what you said, Icon. So I'm going to say an eagle, and I'd be as fast as Flash. So I could fly like from here to the London event in the blink of an eye. I could be in London. So that's what I would say.
I feel you.
All right. So to start the show off, guys, we're actually going to do an interesting feature, and you guys can let us know in the future if you want to see this on a weekly basis. And I'm going to pass it over to Icon. What he does on his channel, which is how I found him because I really love it, is he breaks down scrims, like as many as he can do. He watches more scrims probably than even some of the CDL coaches. And he breaks them down. And he added this new mini map and all this kind of stuff. Great videos. Definitely check out his YouTube channel. But I'm going to have him talk about the kind of the best scrim or the craziest scrim he's seen this week and what he learned from it.
All right. So, yeah, I don't know. I've watched quite a few, but if we're talking about, it's really hard to just kind of break out one of them or just pick one of them. So the one thing that I'll say is going back and forth, Atlanta and Chicago, they scrimmed on, I think it was Thursday of last week. And in that scrim, Chicago won 6-1. So it was a massive beatdown the entire time. And it was kind of weird because every time they scrim, like normally map counts like 5-2 in way of Atlanta. And most of those ones that they win are probably relatively close. They're pretty close. But this was the first time, again, last Thursday, that Chicago just won almost all of them. They took a 6-1 lead in map count. And the ones that they win were by like 80 or 90 points.
Wow.
So exactly. That was the exact same thing that I thought. So with that, I mean, we've basically watched them for, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks. Every time they would scrim Atlanta, they would just get blown out. It was like a daily thing. In fact, I watched them scrim so much that I kind of got sick of just taking a scrim, so a map, and then just watching Chicago lose. So I was pretty shocked by that. And I don't know if it was the slide cancel changes that made, the biggest change in that or whatnot. But just on Saturday, they scrimmed again, and it was the exact opposite. So Atlanta won 8-0. They won 8 maps. Ooh. Chicago won 0. And it makes no sense at all because it was only 2 days apart. So in terms of like that second one, and again, I don't know what the deal was, but there were quite a few of them that Chicago lined up. They had lined up to win. They just didn't execute. So like the first one was Hackney Yard, and they lost by 3. So it was 250 to 247. They lost by 3. So like with that one, a couple kills here or there, and Chicago is probably going to end up taking that map. And then the second one, they went to Gun Runner. So they played hard point on Gun Runner. And that one, Chicago had like an 80-point lead there. So they had an 80-point lead midway through that map, and then they blew it. So as it went to second rotations, they got blown out of the spawns for the second hard point, and then they ended up losing that one. And then in Cave, they lost by 2. So just kind of going through the ones that were close. Those first 3 to start there were close. And then the 5 after that, they kind of got blown out. Like they weren't very close at all. But with Cave, they led like 248 to 210. Third rotations, as it went back to the second hard point, they spawned out and they just couldn't get in. So they gave up all of that time to Atlanta, and all they needed was 2 seconds. They just couldn't execute the kills to get in. And I think after that, it probably demoralized them a little bit. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so can I ask?
Yeah, of course.
And I always am going to do this when you talk about these scrims and stuff. It sounded like you were going to say, I don't know, but you tend to, when I watch your videos, you tend to be very like, I don't like that Formal did that. I don't think Varsity should have done that. Like you're very like in the moment, you see things that you think the team shouldn't have done.
Right.
And they're pro players and sometimes they're going to ego challenge stuff like that. But what would you say was the biggest factor that changed that you saw from that first scrim where it was 6-1 Chicago to where it was 8-0 Dallas or 8-0 Atlanta?
Honestly, I've seen this a lot with Atlanta. And in the first one, it seemed like Celium, it seemed like he just wasn't putting up like the 40 bombs you're used to seeing him put up. So, and it's not just one person, but in that first week, I was kind of shocked that Chicago seemed to be just outslaying Atlanta on basically every map. And then on Saturday, when I watched and Atlanta won the majority of those, they performed much better. And in terms of kills, it was like far more interactions were going Atlanta's way, far more kills were going Atlanta's way. So if we're talking about specifics, I think it's just those clutch kills that happen inside, different hard points as it rotates. I think they were just doing a better job at just locking down those clutch kills. And then once that happens, then you get the majority of the rest of the time in that current hard point.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that probably lays on the back of like Envoy. We've talked quite a bit how, Envoy is a pretty young player and he can be somewhat inconsistent a little bit.
Yeah.
But if he's frying like he possibly can, then Chicago's going to win the majority of those gun battles. Whereas if he's not, then they might go Atlanta's way. So yeah.
I'm sure you saw the whole controversy with Gunless telling Envoy he's going to beat his bleep after Envoy told him to shut the F up.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
Well, the question I have for you, because you watch these scrims and you get to hear them talking to each other, is that consistent? Or is it like, is that kind of a one-off? I know you've mentioned before and we've all seen, and even Gunless admitted that him and Envoy kind of go back and forth because they both think they know what to do on the map better than the other one. But is that something that you consistently see with Chicago, or is it kind of a one-off?
No, it's not very consistent. I've seen it 3 times and really only twice where Gunless kind of just popped off like he did the last time. The first one I broke down on my channel, I went through, I showed the scenario and showed that it was between Gunless and Scump, and both players were kind of right. So it's not something that you see every week. So it's not necessarily like team morale is bad or team chemistry is off or anything. I think that every once in a while they just butt heads, and most of the time both players are right. It's not like Envoy is sitting there arguing something that he didn't see or he didn't do. Most of the times when I went back and I've watched those, both players are right, and what they're saying makes sense. It's just a differing of opinions, and I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just, they're trying to work out the kinks, and I think it would be, probably be more concerning if they were disagreeing and just letting it go. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like if you're arguing, if you see something and your teammate sees something, you want to get it right. So rather than just shut down and be like, all right, yeah, I'll do that next time. Like, at least they could talk through it and talk it out. And maybe it's a little bit toxic here at times, right? Maybe you wouldn't want to see, such the F bombs and stuff like that thrown back and forth. But I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think they're just working through it, and just another day.
So, I guess I agree with you. Someone in the chat said that it's just teammate banter, and that's kind of where everybody landed with this. They said it's just banter between teammates. They're not like, they don't dislike each other. But I will say, as someone who, I watch the players more than I watch anything else. And I have, when stuff like that starts this early in people teaming together, it can turn into something if they start losing. Like, that's when we already have seen that from Seth and Matt. But that level of banter where you're already yelling at someone, telling them shut up and all this kind of stuff and cussing at each other, if they start like, let's say Chicago loses to a team they shouldn't lose to this weekend, that's where that level of banter could turn into real dislike. Well, you told us to do this and we did it. And, and so I'm just hoping that the veterans on the team kind of keep them in check, when it comes to Seth and Matt. I see them as leaders on the team with massive amounts of experience, and they have experience allowing their egos to get the best of them. And I hope that when necessary, they step up and, have the behind the closed doors conversations. I love that old school Optic, new school Chicago has always allowed us to see that side. And they're not like, oh, we're not going to show that to you. Hector has always been like, no, we're going to let you see as much as we can. We don't want people to look bad, but we're going to let you see that there's legitimate disagreements. And we knew people on that team didn't like each other before it was public, And so thanks for sharing that scrim of the week. I'm sure you put some of those. Did you put any of those maps on your channel?
I did put a couple. Yeah, I put the ones that were really close, just to kind of, try to point out where exactly the scrim or the map went one way over the other. So yeah, there are a couple of them up there. And I know I get accused all the time. It's like every other video, somebody will say, you're a Chicago fanboy. And then the next video where Atlanta wins, you're like, you're always saying Atlanta wins. But I promise I'm not. I'm just seeing what I put and I'm just putting it online. So I don't know. So, I promise I'm not a fanboy either way. I'm just trying to show all sides here.
I will tell you from many years of experience being one of the most loved and hated Optic fanboys. The reality is, if you look at my top 20 videos, 7 of them probably have Scump's face on them, and the rest are Nadeshot or Optic. The reality is they're the biggest brand. They have the most viewers, and so the most of their viewers are going to watch your content. So when you make things about Chicago, there's so many millions of people that love that team. They're going to watch your videos. And so it's just the nature of what we do. And I've the funny thing is what I just realized the other day is in those top 20 videos, 4 of them are about Parasite, which I think is interesting. One was when he joined Optic and then left Optic, of course, but in a week's time.
That's old school.
Yeah, it's very old school. But I would say that it's just part of what happens. People are going to call you a fanboy because you're making videos about a team that has the most fans. And that's just the nature of what we do.
I'm actually,
right. Oh, go ahead.
I'm actually a little interested to see what happens in like 3 years down the road once all those OG Call of Duty players retire. Like, what's going to happen when there's no scum, when there's no formal, when there's no aches? You know
Well,
what I
you know
mean?
my
Like,
answer to that. Your answer is Envoy. My answer is Simp. If he gets a personality.
that, well, see, that's the thing. Like, you watch because you want to see the post-match interview with Scum. You want to see, what Aches has to spout off about after that map is over.
Absolutely.
Whereas when Simp has an interview, he's just kind of like says what it is with not really much inflection and just, yeah, we played great. And like, say, you know what I mean? Like, same with everybody else. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see who really rises above the rest of that young group and who takes over as like the lead personality.
Well, winning is going to give some of them the platform to do with what they want. So Simp is going to have a platform. Envoy is going to have a platform. Ilya and Shotzi may have a platforms. It's like winning is going to give some of these guys platforms. There's other guys that are great on these other teams, but if they don't win, nobody's going to notice them. Even if at home series weekends they're big and bad because they're at home. When GodRx goes to London, unless he fries out, people aren't going to be like, I don't even know if Minnesota's going to London, but
no, they're not.
Let's say Atlanta, unless he fries out, people are going to be like, GodRx, can I have your autograph? Oh my gosh. They're going to be like Simp, Abizi, Major Maniac, and all the Dallas players. And, it's going to be the ones that they're used to. And that's what I love about this league and how we're doing things right now. It's just going to be freaking amazing.
I just feel like Scum, we have almost a decade's worth of like background material to get to know him. Whereas Envoy and Simp and Mox and Frosty, like all these young players that are out there, like we don't really know much about them. And I feel like it's up to the orgs to really push that stuff.
Oh
because
my gosh,
if we don't see anything at all from, Celium, like who is he? What's his personality like? Like, I feel like all of these orgs should be pushing some sort of vision or something just so that we can get a glimpse into who they are and what do they like to do and how do they interact with people. And I just feel like the big personalities that are out there just because of kind of what Optic and Envy and those different orgs, the platform that they gave them. So I don't know. I know this is off topic, but
no, you're good.
It's just interesting.
It's a combination. Killa was on Optic, but his platform could be a lot bigger if he did something with it when he was there. Mir, Ricky, all these guys that came through that organization and maybe didn't do as much with their platform as they could have. Like even Teep, as the coach, what he did with that platform as just the coach of Optic Gaming is stream all the time. And he was talking about it today on his stream. I was watching him this morning and people were asking like, how did you grow and all this kind of stuff? And he said, I just grinded. He said, I got a platform from Optic and from winning a world championship and playing with Aches and Krim and, Karma, but I had to grind, and we don't know Scump only because he was on Optic Gaming. We know Scump because he has 25 or 26 championships and he is a clown and he's certifiably funny, like he just is a funny dude and he has a cool story, to your point, somebody tweeted at me today, like, where are all of the videos? Where's all the content from Minnesota even? And it's like, well, that's a good point. Like these orgs are responsible for telling the story of their players and to help us get to know their players. I agree with you on that. So off topic, but good topic. All right. So we're going to start, before we go into our predictions, just start talking about like kind of the biggest changes we want to see going into the weekend in London. And for me, I mean, I don't want to harp on observing. We did that in our last podcast, but the observing, it's got to change. And I'll say the same thing I said last time. Call of Duty is the first-person shooter game. It's the number one. It's the biggest. It's the best. It's the most popular brand. And we should stick by that and honor the fans that we've had while trying to change things and make things look different. I think the overlays that they had for the players to wear the different uniforms that they weren't really wearing in game, but those overlays, that was a great idea. That's awesome. Third person in Search and Destroy, it is a little CSGO reminiscent. I like it. It's not that bad. But we can never again have 9% of kills in a hard point be in first person. That just can't happen. And I know it's not going to. I hope that the league continues to listen to the Mavens of the world and the Bensons and everyone that's telling them how to do what they're doing. The other thing I would say is the timelines for matches. This is a topic that was brought up on the podcast with Nameless and Pac-Man. And, you know, from their perspective, it was interesting to hear how the timelines were. But the guys on hard points like Teep and Maven and those guys brought it up as well. It's like they were told that those matches were going to be an hour and 15 minutes, but they had breaks every second and fourth map. So, and then and Nameless was kind of like, well, I kind of liked it. It's like, well, you're on the desk, dude. Like, of course you like it.
You get to talk about it.
But in my opinion, if you think about traditional sports, we get like breaks at halftime. We do not cut to Charles Barkley and Ernie and Kenny the Jet and Shaq at the end of the first quarter and listen to them talk for 10 minutes about the first quarter. We get to see them maybe at halftime for a little bit, but then we listen to a 20-30 minute show of them at the end. And one of the things that Pac-Man was saying is as a viewer, you end up hearing the same thing over and over and over. Like you're hearing the exact same commentary, because what else are you going to say? Well, in map 1 that I already described 30 minutes ago, you know, and so those are my two big things, is the observing and the timelines for matches. I honestly thought I thought what they did in Minnesota was freaking amazing. And we don't need to talk about audience or anything, because London is going to bring it. It's going to be... I'm
excited to see what London brings, for sure.
It's going to be a show to watch. So those would be my two big ones, would be the observation of the matches, like the broadcast, and then the timelines. Like the timelines, like be realistic and let us watch some Call of Duty. You know, I understand if you got to take breaks for ads, but let us watch. Don't take a 10-15 minute break to listen to Nameless and TP and Praggy like talk at the desk. Like I want to see Call of Duty.
Yeah, I'll say that I think from Friday to Sunday, I think there was a monumental difference in the presentation that they gave us, at least what we were seeing on screen. So I think, like we talked about before, that it was a little bit kind of all over the place. But I think that they had all these new tools. They had these free cams, the static cams, the third person, all these different on-screen displays, like showing people's cameras. And so I think there was just so much stuff to work with that they just kind of wanted to see what was good and what wasn't. I think in terms of the presentation, I totally agree with the breaks. I think one break after Search and Destroy, that would allow you to break down a hard point, or after Dom. So after like the first set, it allow you to break down a Dom, allow you to break down a hard point, allow you to break down a Search. You could say what's going on in each of the game menus while they take like their 5-minute break, and then watch the last two maps. So one break, I get it. Get up, walk around 5 minutes, go to the bathroom, have a snack, whatever you got to do, and then just come back. And then while that break is happening, somebody could be, explaining what's happening from hill to hill and stuff like that. One thing that really bothered me is and we talked about this just a tiny bit, but if you're watching a respawn game mode, show the KDs, show kills, show death, show, who's on a streak, who's not on a streak.
Absolutely.
So respawns, just show the KDs. And then during Search, I'm okay with the pictures, and then in between rounds, and then show the score. So in between rounds, we could see, okay, so Illy's 7-1 right now. Maybe the next, round that we're going into, they should hop on with Illy because he's frying at this moment. So I think that if there was just a little bit of structure to what they're doing in each of the game types, that would be best. So and then the one other thing that I'll point out is the player introductions. So and I know, and again, it seemed like in Minnesota they were trying to figure this out, but they started with kind of like the WWE entrances, where like they would say a name, they'd walk through the crowd, and it would be like some spectacle. And then they went on and they just brought him out from the back. And then they changed it to where they were introducing him like in front of their stations. Like just do one thing. Like before the match starts, maybe just have him come out from the back like they've always done, right? They've always just kind of walked up the stairs in the back of the podium and then came through. Maybe just do that and not make such a spectacle. And then the other thing that I'll do is that's going to save time, right? Instead of having to watch each player go 30 seconds down an aisle, just say, all right, here's scum, here's formal, here's just to speed it up a little bit. So I think that they'll get there. I just think it was the first time through they wanted to try all these different things. But yeah, I think they'll get there. It's just nitpicking little things here and there for me.
Well, and we have audience all over the world now. You have London and Paris playing in these events, and you got to think about what time those people are awake trying to watch
2 a.m.
when we're doing 10-hour days, and I think there's like 7 matches on the first day this weekend, which is going to be crazy. They can't have breaks like that. Chat, if you guys want to throw any changes that you'd like to see, you can, and we'll mention them. But I see some people saying that the argument for breaks might be that those breaks may help a team regain. So one of the things they talked about, and you remember that Pac-Man is a coach, for Optic Gaming, and one of the things he talked about is it was excessive. Like, as a team, 90% of what you do when you're not at a tournament is strategy. And even when you're scrimming, like, you hear, if you listen, even when I'm watching your videos, or if I'm listening to that moment when Gunless kind of went off or whatever, you hear Sender in the background talking. There's a lot of strategy that goes in when you're on stage. You don't need 10 minutes to regain. And what they should do is give that, like you said, after the search, I think that's the only time there's a break that's needed, to maybe talk about the team can get together, they can go to the bathroom, whatever, and then they come back. The people on the desk can talk about the first 2 maps, and they can close it out. So I guess I agree with you. And yeah, the crowd walking was too long, and you're putting professional players in a weird position, and some of them embraced it and some didn't. It's like some became memes. And unfortunately, some tried to make something interesting, and it just didn't work out. Like, you come out with your hood down and then your team gets beat. Yeah, it's not cool. It could have been cool if you won, but it wasn't. All right.
I just want to see what London brings. I just can't wait to see the environment, how many people are there, how energized they are.
You heard Wuskins. Yeah, you arrived too late, Landon. You heard Wuskins was gonna do the he was gonna do what's him call its walkout. The UMG fighter. Not UMG. Who am I thinking of? Oh my gosh. I know it's Conor McGregor. He was gonna do his walkout.
UFC.
And so he said, yeah, he's a UFC. So it's Landon made me think of UMG, but he's gonna do Conor McGregor's walkout in London. He said when he was being interviewed, I don't know what I was watching, but he was being interviewed, and he said he was gonna do that before, but he's going to do it for the home opener. Like, and I'm like, that is going to be dope. If they give him the opportunity to come out,
it'd be
you sweet. Better win the match is all I'm saying.
Yeah, you get smoked, dude.
If he did that and I was the team that beat him, I would definitely be Conor McGregoring my way.
Oh, absolutely.
Or walking over for the high five, like, good game, oh my gosh, that would be crazy. All right. So we're going to go into our predictions now, guys. Looking to make sure none of you guys had any recommendations. The venue looked empty from the camera. Yeah, we talked about that last week, just that they need to do better camera shots. If they're going to have a performance on stage where they know there's not going to be a lot of people in the stands, then put the camera just on the stage. Like, even if you watch the Super Bowl, like, halftime show, the camera was on the people on stage. You didn't see a lot of who was in the field jumping around because it was a small crowd that was surrounding them. And when they did show that crowd, it was tight shots. And so that's just basic broadcasting, and I'm sure they'll get help with that. These are all things that they're going to learn from. And the one show that I'm predicting is going to be dope enough to actually show the crowd is probably in Atlanta, because FaZe just knows a lot of people. They know a lot of popular, well-known artists, and they're such a huge brand. Them and Chicago, maybe. I think their home weekend, like, their event is going to be like a big, gigantic event. Not that Minnesota wasn't, but unfortunately, there was 2 features we didn't get to see. We didn't get to see Gary play Hex, and we didn't get to see any of the athletes because of what happened with, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. So, we missed out, but I think it'll be a good show this weekend. All right, we're going to move into our predictions, guys, and I'm going to preface this by saying, be nice to me. Be nice to me. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go group by group. I'm gonna tell you guys my group A predictions and let you massacre me in the chat. And then we're gonna switch over and let Icon tell you his group A, and then we'll do group B. And then we'll talk about the final bracket and how it's going to work out. And if we have some time left for miscellaneous, we will do that. I'm trying to see what time it is now. Okay. So maybe after my group A, we might take a brief break. But we're going to go into mine right now. So for the first match with Dallas facing off against Seattle, I have Dallas winning over Seattle. I think that Dallas has a lot to prove. They have a lot that they're going to want to show. And especially for the first match, and they're going to be well practiced because we're never going to have the situation again where there's no practice stations or not enough. And I think they're just going to fry. I think that may even be a 3-0 with Seattle struggles in search that they had in the past. I definitely see that being a 3-0 or a 3-1. Chicago, I have over Los Angeles. Chicago looks like the best team in the game right now. And as you heard from Icon earlier, they split scrims basically with Atlanta over the last week. They went 6-1 and then they lost 8-0. And then I have Chicago over Dallas when they face off in the upper part of the bracket, which means Dallas would drop down to losers. In losers, I have Seattle winning over the Gorillas. That'll be a grudge match. It'll be another one that probably goes 5 maps, but I think Seattle will I'm hoping they will find their footing in that map 5. And then I know it's crazy, but I'm going to say it. I have Seattle over Dallas, pulling off a crazy upset. And then you guys just have to remember, I'm a Seattle dad and I'm a Seattle fan. And I'm actually this is cool for me because as someone who lives in Seattle, I'm actually deciding that this year I'm going to be a fan of a team and I'm going to actually be a fan of Seattle. And so I'm picking them to win. Now, if I looked at paper, yes, of course, I would have Dallas beating them, and it would be a predictable that Dallas and Chicago at the end of the day would be the 2 teams left. But I'm going a different route. I'm saying that Dallas is going to get upset. They're going to have 10 points after this event, and they're going to not be very happy about it. And I'm saying that Seattle is going to pull off a huge upset. Karma's going to just go crazy. Octane's going to just be in the right positions at the right time. And it's going to be scrappy, but that they're going to win over Dallas, and then Seattle and Chicago will advance from Group A. Yes, I see the golden boy face, and that's goalie. That's so mean, goalie. You could have just said that in my ear. All right, I'll let Icon give you guys a more realistic version of Group A.
All right. So if I had to go through my Group A, it's probably going to be a little bit more conventional. It's probably going to be what you guys would probably guess if you were also making these predictions. But first one there, I do think Dallas is going to win. I think that this is going to be close. I do think that if I had to guess by game mode, I think Seattle is going to win a couple of those respawns. I've been watching them recently. Even today, I watched a Florida and Seattle scrim. And afterwards, Karma dropped like 45 on Gun Runner. Whoa. So, I mean, they're playing really well. So I do think a couple of those, they're going to end up pulling out a couple of those respawns, but I just don't see them beating Dallas in Search and Destroy. I think there's a couple of teams that are clearly above everybody else in Search. Obviously, Atlanta's one of them. There are a couple others that we haven't really talked about, like Toronto's really good in Search. They didn't lose a map in Minnesota. So there's a couple teams that are really good in Search, and I think that Dallas is one of them. So I think all of those respawns will be super close. But I just can't imagine. I don't know. I do think that's going to be 3-2 in terms of Dallas. It'll be close. I think all the respawns will be close, but I think Dallas ends up winning that 3-2 because of their ability in Search and Destroy. After that, obviously Chicago. Now, if I had to guess like by maps, I think this will be a 3-1. Chicago's just not, they just don't have the strategy in Search and Destroy yet. And that was evident in the matchup that they had with Dallas in Minnesota. They got absolutely blown out of the water on that Arklov Search and Destroy. So if I had to guess, I do think it's going to be a 3-1 and not they're not going to lose one of the respawns. They're just not going to be able to take that third map, I don't believe. So Chicago will win that. And then from there, this one is a struggle, right? If we're talking about who's going to end up winning between Dallas and Chicago, I don't know. It's tough. I put Chicago, but I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's either going to be, so my main prediction is that Chicago is going to win this 3-1. But if Dallas takes a couple of those respawns that are going to be really close, I think Dallas is going to win 3-2, just because I can't see Chicago beating Dallas in that match 5 search and destroy. So my prediction is that I don't think it's going to get there. I think Chicago's going to win the 3 respawns, and I think Dallas is going to take that search. So I think it's going to be 3-1. And then
you said if, I thought you said earlier, if Dallas can win one of those respawns, you have them winning the series.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I just don't think any of the maps Chicago can beat Dallas at search and destroy.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if they pull out one of those respawns, I think that's going to be all that it takes. But in my mind, I just can't see them losing in those respawns either. So for that, I do think Chicago is going to come out of it. Once we go down to the losers bracket, I absolutely think Seattle is going to be able to beat LA. I think that's going to be easy. I think it'll probably be a 3-0, honestly. I don't think LA has the firepower. If you were to go back and look at the KDs from the Minnesota land for LA, it was just like, it was poor. I think Aches had like a 0.6, a 0.5 overall KD. So I just don't think that they have the firepower. And eventually, and I know we're talking about your team here a little bit, but I think there's so much star power on that Seattle roster. Some point in time, they're going to show up. So yep. I think this is going to be an easy 3-0. I think you're going to see Karma dropping 40 bombs just like he did in scrims today. So I think Seattle gets out of that easy. But again, when they run into Dallas in that losers final, I just can't see them beating them in search. And this all kind of, let me say this real quick. This all kind of relies upon what Shotzzy provides in this. So Shotzzy was the one that he was like 6-24 or something, one map at one point in time, one map in Minnesota. So if he pulls that again, then I think Seattle might be, a safe pick there. But I just can't see him doing it. Every time I watch them scrim, he plays so well. And I think it might have just been like some first match jitters. I think that's probably out of the way a little bit. So I have Empire coming out of that losers bracket, but it wouldn't shock me if Seattle does. So my predictions would be Chicago and Dallas coming out of that bracket, but it wouldn't shock me if we went your way here.
So here's what's funny. You actually gave a better argument for my ridiculous prediction.
All right.
You made it sound like at least what I said was possible. It may not be probable, but you made it sound like it's possible. Like it could happen based on, like you said, what Shotzzy does. And if Karma goes off, I'm impressed. And I'll say this before we go to break real quick. I'm impressed that I'm looking at teams where Krim is probably the best player on his team and may consistently drop the best stats until Illy and Shotzzy kind of pick up, and then I'm impressed that Karma may be dropping the best stats on his team over like Octane. I'm impressed that those guys who have been in this league for so freaking long. Now, Aches is not going to drop the best stats on his team. We just know that. But he will be the loudest talker, the biggest walker. Like that's what Aches will be for his team. And it matters. I know it seems like it doesn't matter, but it matters. And so, all right, guys, I'm paying attention to your questions. We're going to have a point in the show later where we're going to have questions from the chat. We're going to take a quick break before we come back and do Group B and the bracket closing. And then we have some interesting topics to close the show out with, kind of some miscellaneous topics. If you guys have questions for us, you can tweet them at me, Kingdom_Soldier. I do not remember your handle because I know you just changed it. It's like Icon Nation YT. Oh, it's on screen, according to this voice whispering in my ear. So you can tweet at either of us if you have some questions or you want us to talk about something. Otherwise, put it in the chat, and we'll try to grab it for you guys. Thank you for all the follows and subs. We'll call them out later in the show. We'll be right back in some amount of seconds. All right. Welcome back, guys. We were having some silly conversations while you guys were gone. We're very thankful that it was during a break because we might get ourselves in trouble. And I don't think, did you say that you were a middle school teacher when you opened?
I did not. Nope.
Oh, okay. Well, I know you can't talk about like where you teach and stuff. I used to work when I was a Starbucks manager. I used to not say Starbucks. I'd be like, I'm a retail manager. But I think it's cool that Icon is a middle school teacher and I have a middle schooler. Guys will probably see him walking around in the background.
I think it plays into like being able to describe what I'm seeing on screen so well, like being part of my background. So being able to like break down maps and stuff. So it's like combining what I do professionally with what I like to do as a hobby almost. I don't know.
I've never actually thought about it that way.
Who knows? It's just,
I mean, you're in a chaotic environment, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know.
It can be,
depending on what you teach, you know. But I know it can be because kids are learning who they are at that stage, and they're trying to be something that most of them don't even want to be it. But anyway, I guess that's for another day. One day we'll actually have an IRL stream, and we'll talk about
there you go,
raising middle schoolers from a teacher's perspective and a parent's perspective. All right, so we're gonna go to Group B. I don't think. Well, you guys were saying my Group B predictions are crazy as well, but they're not as crazy as my Group A predictions.
It's a little crazy.
I'm a crazy predictor. All right, we're gonna go to Group B, guys, and I'm gonna share with you guys my Group B matches and who I think is gonna win and all that kind of stuff. So you can see it on the screen now. I have Paris beating New York. Now, this was a hard one for me to pick because I was in some stream and Kismet hopped in. Oh, it was Codcast. And Kismet hopped into the chat and was kind of being a little, not even a little. He was being he has a big ego, I'll say. And he, after playing not even a tournament, a 2-team of like where you played, I mean, you played 2 matches, you know, and so I think talking a lot of mess, if you're not a team that has multiple championships like Chicago or Dallas or even the Gorillas, you know, Aches could talk, you know, like, hey, I'm a world champion 2-time, get off me, you know, like, but when you win 2 matches in this invitational show match type format and then talk a lot of mess, I kind of was like, oh, he's a great player, but that's going to hit him. That ego is going to deflate the moment they lose. So I think New York is going to come in a lot more prepared. If they don't win a match this upcoming weekend, Censor's going in. It's going to happen. I know that's the craziest prediction
bold.
Ever.
That's a hot take.
But I'm sure you guys heard Censor's motivational speech when he was talking to Krim on stream, and it was great. I was like, dang, Censor, like, okay, dude. I mean, Censor's always believed in Censor, and nobody can stop that dude from believing in himself. And so I do have Paris winning, though, because I think this is where the time zone thing might make a difference. Paris is going to be a little more prepared. They're going to be well rested. And I think New York is going to come out firing better, but there's going to be something missing from their game. So I have Paris winning. I have London over Toronto. Yeah, Toronto did a good job. And aren't they, we haven't talked about this yet, but they're switching a player, right? Isn't Bance playing now?
They is, yep.
Okay, so they have Bance coming in over medals, and I don't know very much about Bance, but and I don't know how much of a difference it'll make. I thought they did probably the best they could in Minnesota. Great in search. When they played Seattle, like methods fried, and had a over 1 KD in all maps and modes, like 1.2, 1.4, stuff like that. And so we'll see, but I do have London beating them. I think the home field advantage, so to speak, is going to play into London. And the worst thing you could ever see at one of these home events is if the home team loses their first match. Like, it would not be fun to see London go to the losers bracket.
What if they don't make it to the next day?
Bro, that's what I talked about on the last time we were on the show. It's like, can you imagine if London doesn't make it to the final, to the next day of the event, and they're just, to quote old school, they're just sitting there watching. Like,
Yeah.
I can't, there are some of these teams that is going to be a reality for them. Maven said before the season started, how would you feel investing $25 million and you put your brand on somebody's sleeve and they play 2 matches and they lose both matches and then they're out? They're just not in the tournament anymore.
And that's the rest of your homestand.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and who is your crowd going to still show up? I mean, they bought tickets, but they don't get to root for London. Maybe they'll just switch and root for Paris. Like, I don't know. It's a good thing it's not old school Call of Duty where the non-NA teams had no chance. Metals has been, I'd seen that question in chat. Metals has actually been playing. Oh, you typed it. Okay. Metals has been playing with the B team, they called it, the Toronto P2P team, like the challengers team. So, but I have London over Toronto, and then I have New York winning over Toronto. And you may think it's crazy when I have New York beating Paris, but the reason is because I have New York over Toronto, and that is going to give them the fuel and the gas they need, in my opinion, to beat Paris. And because Paris is going to get beat by London, they're going to get the opposite effect. So basically, when New York and Paris play each other, there's going to be this kind of like, Paris is going to be deflated because they lost. And they're going to, if they lose in the way that I think they're going to lose to London, then they're going to be deflated in a way where it's like, oh my gosh, I talked all that mess. I was on the podcast talking in the chat, and now I just lost to London. He freaking Conor McGregor walked across the stage on me after, because they talked Kismet talked a lot of mess when they beat London in Minnesota. And that was a hot 3-0. And I think that's going to deflate them in a way to where they're still going to have the same skill, but their will is going to be lower. New York's is going to be higher from beating Toronto. And New York's going to be like, okay, we got our game back. And Zuma's going to be shouting in people's ears. Revan is going to be hopefully giving them some strats on how they can win and beat Paris. And I think Paris will be out of the tournament. And I have New York and London advancing from Group B.
Okay. I can see it. Now, again, I kind of proved what you were talking about with Group A, so I can see it a little bit, but mine looks totally different. So,
go ahead. Let's see what you got.
If we're gonna go into what I have predicting, first of all, if we start with Paris and New York, I think Paris is gonna win this, but I'm not sold. So let's just, in terms of those Minnesota matches, they played OGLA, right? Paris played OGLA, which, I mean, they have all the stars on OGLA, but they haven't really been performing very well. And they played London, and that was a brutal beatdown of London. But in a tournament setting, it might be a little bit different. There's kind of a lot more on the line. With that, you're just playing 2 matches, and if you do well, great. If you don't, whatever. So there's not a lot of pressure there. So in terms of Paris and New York, the last thing that I'll say is that New York had the most impressive win at Minnesota. When they beat Atlanta in that Hackney Yard domination, that was the most dominant performance. That was the most impressive performance. But I am going to take Paris, but I wouldn't be surprised if New York came out and won that. So that first matchup, I'm going to take Paris. And I could do the same thing with London and Toronto. If Toronto is able to sneak one of those respawn game types, I don't see how they lose in Search and Destroy. So if you're Toronto, if you can just get one of those respawns, because they were terrible at respawns, but they were one of the best teams in Minnesota at Search and Destroy. So if you can force, I don't know, if you can maybe squeak out like a 10-point win in domination, then I could see Toronto winning that. But I'm not willing to go that way. And when you were talking about this, you talked about how they'll have the home crowd energy and it's in London and all that. But we talked about this a little bit before. This isn't like traditional sports, right? It's not like you can feed off of the crowd and that gives you more motivation to, I don't know, like run a ball if you're playing football or something. Like, it's not quite the same. If anything, it might just give you more jitters as you're trying to play, an esport like Call of Duty. So I don't know if you can feed off that the same way you can in traditional sports, but I am going to take London there. And then coming out of the winners bracket, and this is just solely based on what we saw from these two teams when they were in Minnesota. I guess anything's possible because we don't really have that much to pull from yet. It's not like we can go through and we can watch 20 scrims of Paris because they just don't stream, right? They haven't streamed anybody. They haven't played Chicago, who streams all the time. They don't really have much out there. Right. So I'm going to take Paris, but the only thing that I can take them from is based off of how they played against London last time. So that's what I'll get there. As we go down to the losers bracket, New York and Toronto. Again, I was unbelievably shocked by New York's performance in Minnesota. I expected them to lose to Atlanta, but I didn't expect in the other series them to come out as flat as they did. So in this, I think this might be a little bit of, kind of like a revenge match here. It's win or go home at this point. So yeah, right. I do feel like New York's going to step up here and win their respawns. Again, I don't know if they can beat Toronto in Search and Destroy. Toronto is just so good in Search and Destroy, and we talked about this a little bit last time, but if you have a starting 5 and you have a backup 5, you can play against each other and kind of break down those strategies that you're doing in Search and Destroy. So I don't know. I'm going to take, I don't think New York plays so well when they play online in different scrims and whatnot. I just think that they're not going to lose those respawns, but if they do drop one of those, I would look for Toronto to win that. So I'm going to take New York, but it wouldn't surprise me either way. As it goes to the next round, I just think London is too talented, especially in S&D. Scraps and Wuskin were so good in Search and Destroy at Minnesota. So I just think that'll be maybe like a 3-1 if I had to guess. I do think New York will win a respawn. I think they'll probably win that first hard point. And then after that, I'll think that they'll get swept from there. So I have London. So I have Paris and London coming out of Group B.
Rewind for 2 seconds.
Okay.
What did you say the map count was on the New York, London?
New York, London. Well, see, I could see it going 5 games. I think it's going to be 3-1 just because London's not going to lose a Search and Destroy. I could see New York winning like that domination match. I could see them squeaking that out, but I don't see them. They're definitely not winning a Search and Destroy, and I just don't see them winning a hard point either. So I would say 3-1. But if it goes game 5, then it's definitely going to be London 3-2 because they're just not going to lose Search.
So somebody in the chat asked if you've watched New York scrims. Have you?
Yeah. Yep.
What are they not doing something right in hardpoint that gives you that like kind of thought that they won't win a hardpoint? Or
yeah, there are certain times where they're off rotations or they're not rotating properly. I will say that I uploaded just a scrim of them a few days ago, and Formal dropped 40. He dropped like 43 or something. And if you're playing somebody like Formal and you're playing Hardpoint, and Formal just has the ability to just lock down flanks, right? That's just like you can just put him on one side of the map and he can just lock the whole thing down. So if we're judging that based off playing Chicago, who knows how accurate it really is, just because Chicago is obviously one of the best teams. But yeah, their rotations seem a little bit off. There was once I watched them on Hackney Yard Domination where they got spawn trapped inside of green, and it seemed like everybody was just trying to take off in different routes. So it wasn't real coordinated. So if you can perform a spawn trap in Domination on Hackney Yard, if you have all 3 points, you can spawn trap them in green. So they're like their strategy to get out of that spawn trap was just seemed scattered. Like some people were going towards A, a couple people were going heaven back to C. Yeah. So yeah, I think if they're just a little bit more coordinated, but because they definitely have the gun skill, right? They have the talent, they have the ability to win those respawns. They just have to put it together.
Is there a weak link on their team in your opinion?
I don't know if there's a weak link. I mean, the only thing that we really have to go off of is, I mean, they played at they played Atlanta. Probably 10 teams out of 12 are going to look bad, or 9 out of 11 are going to look bad against Atlanta. So how much can you really pull from that? Now, their stats from Minnesota were terrible. I think in terms of like a respawn KD, like accuracy was 0.7 and temp was 0.7. So everybody was
Zero
bad.
Was really bad, right?
It's not like Toronto where Methods had like a 1.3 and the rest of his team was like a 0.8. So it's not like somebody stood out and like somebody didn't. So you could say, okay, this is the missing link or the broken link. it's just everybody played bad. And if half of what you're judging off of is against Atlanta, everybody's going to look that way, except for, the top 2 or 3 teams.
Well, and right now, most people, which I'm actually happy because me and you we still put Dallas in top 4, and most of pros and casters and everybody's come out and said the same thing. And so until that event was it was show match style. They were put against the 2 biggest teams. Like, we all expected them to go 0-2, not in that fashion necessarily, but
Right.
I think we'd have to see more from them and see them play some other teams. And that's what I'm thinking with New York. Like, I'm wondering when they scrim against teams that are a little more equally matched with their abilities, like, what's not happening. It saddens me to hear, because they have 2 good coaches. It saddens me to hear that that they seem like they don't have strategy, because I've seen these players play in the past and run strats. All of their players. I've seen Zuma, Mr. Flanks a lot, do some crazy things on the map. I've seen Attach, one of the craziest plays we've ever seen in Call of Duty history, running through his own streak. Like, we've seen these guys play well in all different game modes. And so, and I know they have to gel, this is different, franchising puts teams together that aren't necessarily handpicked, with the exception of Chicago, which Hex hinted at in a interview with Envoy that there's some decision that he was on the fence about that he can't talk about yet that made Envoy be their 5th, him and Arcides, because him and Arcides were already together. And I think they were looking at 2 other people. I don't know. He couldn't talk about it.
Who knows?
But, yeah, exactly. We'll find out eventually because he'll tell.
I will say in the chat real quick, somebody's asking about Vidal Monroe's asking about communication with New York, and we can't tell. There's no way of knowing, like, why aren't they performing the way that they probably should. The only teams that we can really tell with communication would be Chicago, because they stream everything. And then just today, Florida started streaming. So like Pristini and Frosty. So everybody from Florida was streaming also, but we don't know. We can't tell what's going on communication wise with New York. So it's just kind of, I don't know. That's something that we can't really
Octane, tell. I know Octane streams and makes YouTube videos consistently, but does he do scrims? Does he stream their scrims?
I haven't seen him. I mean, he could. I just haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
He could.
Yeah, man, I'm such a personal brand advocate, bro. Like, when I see people have the ability to be professional and do what Scump and Envoy and Formal are all doing probably right now, what they started streaming hours ago, all at the same time. Like,
it's awesome.
Take the advantage of the opportunity. And if the biggest and best team is willing to do, we're gonna get if the biggest and best team is willing to say we're gonna stream, then if you're the smallest team or if you're in New York, like if I'm Attached, I'm streaming. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I just anyway.
the biggest thing is you're only gonna build your brand if people know the personalities. If you don't know the personalities on the team, then what makes me want to be a Chicago fan or an Atlanta fan or a Seattle fan is that I know those personalities from their time with Optic or Atlanta, following. So if you're one of these smaller teams, I mean, Hex laid it out for you. Just follow his MO, right? Just put out content and have like a vision type series so people get to know. And then there's some attachment there. Imagine the attachment that could be built in the UK for London if they had some sort of series like that. I mean, you have a whole country behind one team.
The COD League, and I'm not going to say they dropped the ball, but if they did a campaign for London going into the London event, it would be epic.
Or Paris, but I mean, you got to make content.
Crinimus, no, I did not respond to your tweet yet. I was just letting you know that we're going to talk about it when we get to questions from chat. We haven't gotten there yet. And then I know that not everybody, Vidal, does content and that content isn't important to everyone. But I know way more players that say, I wish I would have, than I know players that say, I'm glad I didn't. And that's just all I'll say about that topic. Like, there's so many players that are like, dang, I should have at least tried. I should have tried to make content. And I know way more that think that way than players that are like, man, I'm so glad that I didn't make content. You know what I'm saying? Because yeah, look, Killa is one of my prime examples, and I've DM'd him back in the day, like, dude, make videos, make content, and people love watching Killa. They love this guy. He gives some of the best interviews that we've ever seen. Anyway, all right, guys. Yeah, it could be shyness. We're gonna talk about finals because we didn't yet. So I'll do mine first. So in Group A, I had Seattle and Chicago advancing, and I had New York and London advancing. And in the finals, I have Chicago beating New York. I have London beating Seattle. And if I have to go into any detail, I think Chicago's just the better team. And if it's New York, if it's Paris, if it's Toronto, whoever it is, I think Chicago's going to beat them. I think the only team that would be a challenge is somebody from their group, like Dallas. And so I think it'll be, I think that'll be fine. Now, if London goes losers and then they end up playing Chicago, that could be an epic match if it's Chicago versus London. But I think Chicago's going to beat New York. It'll probably be a 3-1. And then London, I think, will beat Seattle. I think Seattle will run out of gas, no pun intended. And I think London is going to run into gas. They're going to convince themselves that they are going to go to the final match and beat Chicago. They'll take all the energy from the crowd and they'll go for it. Yeah, yikes is right, Molly. And then I have Chicago winning. And I won't break down points because one of the things that I talked about is how the points are going to be at the end of this event. Yes, I'm a Seattle fan. But I won't break that down and talk about that until after we look at Icon's predictions for the final matches.
All right. So finals, I think mine probably looks a little bit more run of the mill, probably what people would expect to see. But so just pointing out real quick, so the winner of Group A plays who makes it out of the losers for Group B.
Right.
So just in case people are curious of where these are coming from. So the winners in A plays the losers of B. The winners in B plays the losers of A. So that's how they come together. So in the semis, I have the winners being Chicago with the losers of Group B being London. I just think it's too much. I just think that there's too much firepower. There's too much, and it's not even necessarily firepower. It's just that their roster has been there before, right? They're all full of, and we're talking about Chicago, by the way. So everybody from Chicago, they're just pros. They've been there. The stage isn't going to be too big for them, and not only do they have more firepower, but they've also been there before. So I think that the moment won't be too big for them, and that will end up. I do think it'll probably be 3-1. And again, it's that search and destroy. So London looked really good in search and destroy their first match in Minnesota. They looked pretty bad against Paris their second match. So if Chicago ever develops, which I would have to think that they would, if Chicago ever develops like a dominant search and destroy, it's going to be them in phase and everybody else. That's how I feel. But so I think this will be 3-1. I just can't see them dropping a respawn to London. But I just hope that London is there. I just want to see London. I want to see the finals packed. And again, like we talked about earlier, if they don't make it, that makes me a little bit nervous. So Chicago over London. In the bottom half of that, I have Dallas and Paris. So the winner from B with the loser of A. With that, I think Dallas ends up winning. So again, we don't really know much from Paris, but I can't imagine that Shotzi, Illy, and Hugh won't be dominant again. If we're talking about just the way that they performed in Minnesota, Crim6 was by far their best player, and everybody else was very subpar for what they're capable of. Right. And I think now that first weekend's out of the way and they've got another day under their belt in London, I think sooner or later they're going to solidify themselves as in that 3 position, right in the top 3. And then if they beat Chicago in that grand finals, I mean, anything's possible, right? I just don't see it. If I didn't have them, winning that matchup earlier, I'm not going to think that anything's going to force that to turn differently in the end. Right. So this will be the second time that they play them. Also, do you know, will it be like, so since Chicago hasn't lost, will it be 2 best of 5s? Will they have to win 2 best of 5s, or will it just be 1?
I don't know how that's going to work, because I think it seems as if it's going to almost be like a resetted bracket. When it goes down,
it seems like it's just going to be straight. You get, single elimination.
Because it's a single elimination bracket. So I'm guessing that it's just going to almost be like a full reset. Like there is no winners and because there's technically, even though there's a losers bracket in the group stage, there's no losers bracket in the final stage. So if you win, you keep playing. Basically, if you win 4 matches, you win this event.
See, I just feel like if it's a team that you've already played and you beat them, like it shouldn't. I get what you're saying. Like there's no, as it resets, there's no losers bracket. But to me, it just feels like there
in your bracket, doesn't Chicago and Dallas play each other twice already, right? Or is that in my bracket?
No, in mine. Yeah. I have them matching up in group stage with Chicago winning, which is why I was saying in the final, I just don't see them. I don't see them losing if I had them picked to win earlier.
Yeah, it's gonna. So the not having a losers bracket in the final it's interesting, but we've seen it before. It's not something new. I think if you had a losers bracket at like that X Games that Optic won, maybe they wouldn't have been able to take it. You know, you never know. And there's some very strong teams at these events that could make a good losers bracket run. But without a losers bracket outside of the group stage, I think your picks are, I don't want to say safe, but I think they're predictable, you know, in terms of what we've seen on paper, which is really all we can do right now.
Right. That's it.
Mine are a little crazy. Yes, Easy Mac, I'm nuts. And I picked Seattle over Dallas in the losers bracket. And Seattle and Chicago, I have them advancing. I'm a Seattle fanboy this year, as a Seattle native and a dad. Just makes sense. So I do want to mention before we go to some of the questions from chat that I got off Twitter. And if you guys have questions, you can type them into the chat now. And then we kind of have some miscellaneous topics that we might want to mention. What time is it? Oh yeah, we got time. So if Chicago wins, so let's just say Chicago wins because we both had Chicago winning. That's 50 points for Chicago. That means they have 70 total, right? Going into Atlanta, Atlanta has 20. So the best Atlanta can do by winning their own event is to be tied with Chicago. If Chicago wins the next event, which Atlanta won't be at, Chicago then can go up to 120 points. And then the next, it's going to go literally, I think I charted it out, and it's like going to go back and forth until they play each other. Which you really just have this weird who's in first place and who do you really count as being in first? Are we gonna say Chicago's really number one if Atlanta's not there? You know what I'm saying? Like, no, Chicago is not in Atlanta. And so you're gonna have two teams that will probably be tied at the end of Atlanta unless Atlanta gets upset. This is the reason why I thought that Atlanta should have 6-0'd in Minnesota, scared all those teams so that when they came to Atlanta, they just got fried. Because teams are going to look at Chicago as the number one team after this weekend if they dominate like we're predicting they're going to. But they still have not played Atlanta on land. So like it is weird. But in my bracket, you'd have London with 30 points, leaving with 30 points. So they'd have 40. You'd have New York leaving with 20 and they only have 20. Seattle 20 and they only have 20. Paris and Dallas would leave with 10. And for Dallas, they'd only have 10. Paris would have 30. And then LAG and Toronto, I would have them leaving with 0. So they'd each have, I believe, 10 points from what they gained in Minnesota. It's going to be the way that the list is going to work out, in my opinion, is going to be really interesting. On that topic, and I kind of want to know your opinion, Icon. I put out a video on it today if you guys want to go watch it. Not right now. But what's up, Fire Guy? So would you consider personally, and I know you haven't seen my video yet, so you don't know what I use to back that up. Would you consider these home weekend events as championships? Would you consider, if I'm Scump and I win this weekend, I can add a championship to my championship count? If I'm Envoy, I can add a championship. If I'm Formal, would you consider Krim, if he wins 5 this year, he continues to be the winningest player? What's your opinion on that?
No, absolutely not. I think,
okay, go ahead.
I think in order, now I do think that this schedule will be best suited if there was like, I don't know, like when you get a third of the way through like whatever your schedule is, then there was like a massive tournament, like kind of like the old, you know, there was MLG Columbus or something. So like a big tournament where all the teams were there. Right. But if all the teams are there, I don't know how you consider yourself a champion. right?
Mhm.
If you end up winning in London, so Chicago ends up winning in London, I don't see how they can say that that they won a championship because all the teams aren't there.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it kind of stinks in a way because you have all these people like that's kind of how they go by saying, who's the GOAT, who has the most major championship wins. So like these, I don't consider majors. I wouldn't go through and say that there are 12 majors this year. I think it would be best if there was like, a third of the way through, then there was one, and then another third of the way through, there was a big tournament, like 3 or 4 spaced out throughout the year.
Right.
So yeah, I honestly I don't know how they'll go about that. One thing I'll say real quick, just going back to what you're saying, those two teams, so Atlanta and Chicago, aren't going to match up until Minnesota.
Right.
So I
called that out.
That's not until May. So it's going to go all the way until May until those two teams actually get a chance to prove who's better.
May is actually the first time that Chicago and Florida match too. So Pristini and Arcides, they have to play each other in May. They could play each other before that if they both make it out and they play each other in the bracket. But in May, they actually are scheduled to play each other.
Right.
So here's my 2 cents.
Let's hear yours. Yeah.
I count these as invitational tournaments, just like that X Games where Proofy and Scump and Clayster and Nadeshot counted that as a championship. It was an invitational tournament. We've had a lot of invitational tournaments in our esport where we've counted it as chips. There was an event, I think it was called AEL Dallas, that I think TK won. It was a $25,000 tournament that there was only 2 pro teams at. I would count that as a championship for Sharp, Gunjar, Theory, and Neslo. Just because Optic and FaZe weren't there, there's another tournament. It was like UGC Niagara. Just because big teams aren't, and it was only Envy and TK. Just because big teams aren't there, I would not say that that's not a victory for those guys. They didn't do this. Like the league did this, in my opinion. And so for us to only have one tournament for the whole year, one championship being offered is ludicrous, in my opinion. And that's one of the big reasons why I would count it as a championship, because I'm like, we can't just have champs as the only championship. Like, that can't be what we do this year. We had a midseason tournament that disappeared off the schedule, and I don't know if it's going to come back. But in my humble opinion, if I'm New York and I'm temp, I'm like, I got a chip. If I'm Envoy, I got a chip. If I'm Illy Shotzi, I won a championship. I think London should make a trophy, and it should say London Invitational Champions or London Home Weekend or whatever they want, whatever these are called, Home Series Champion. I think they should get to hoist a trophy. Like, what happens at the end of the event? They just stand there on the stage with confetti, with no check, no trophy, no MVP, and they just like, I won, and it's over. I mean, excuse me for saying this, but that would be lame to me. Like, as a fan of this esport, I don't think it's fair to the players to make a league where we could not, because of travel, put 12 teams at every event this year. Next year, for sure, I guess I'm guaranteeing almost that they will do 12. And I agree with you, Easy Mac, in the chat. There's got to be something. They have to. If you're not going to call it a championship, you got to call it something. We're only going to give out rings this year, and that's it. Like, that can't be what we do. And so, and I'm a little bullheaded about it because I look at the history of our esport, and I'm looking at the tournaments that I mentioned, like UGC Niagara and Ghost, where it was just TK and Envy, X Games, where Optic won, and it was an 8-team invitational tournament with this exact same style of bracket. AEL Dallas, where it was Curse, TK, and FaZe, 3 pro teams. I would give TK a championship for that. Or in Advanced Warfare, MES Detroit, 25K. Elevate, Rise, Envy, TK, and Epsilon were the only teams there. FaZe, this is AW, and you had no FaZe, no Optic, and I believe Denial was playing back then. You had no Denial, and I would count a $25,000 tournament as a championship. And so it's interesting, and I heard, it was funny because on the podcast or something I was listening to, somebody was like, well, if they get a championship, and then the first thing that was mentioned was like, wait, are we counting these? I saw Lion, the designer guy, on Twitter. Somebody talked about championships, and then he responded, is this a championship? That's funny what they're saying in the chat. Yes, Sensor counts his champs NA qualifier as a win. There is no money. If you guys are asking if there's money, these players are being paid between $150,000 and $350,000 a year. They're not getting prize pools, prize pools for challengers, which is what is amazing about our esport. And you can't tell me that who was it? What are the name of the guys starts with the S that won the challengers in Minnesota? Oh my gosh. Singularity. Thank you. A secret voice in my ear. Singularity. I'm a champion. Like, I'm going home like we won. Like, we won the challengers event. You're going to tell me that the challengers get to have events, but the pro players don't? Like, to me, that is just weird. And I get 100% Icon. I'll say before you talk, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and I get it because there is no phase at this event. There's no Chicago at the Atlanta event, but I'm not going to tell Atlanta they didn't win. I don't. We have to call it something, and so that's why I'm saying, I'm imploring that we call it a championship until we have a better name or something like that, because we can't have one championship this year, one tournament. That would be the weirdest year of Call of Duty ever. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll say that I was a little bit disappointed when they changed the format. I know everybody really likes like the tournament style, but I wish that they would have. And this is just, I don't know if it's just being selfish or what, but I wish that there would have been matches every weekend, and then maybe split the league into like 3 seasons, right? 3 seasons.
That'd be dope. Yeah.
So like you play different matches for 4 or 6 weeks, and then you get a seeding, and then at the end of that first season, there's a tournament with everybody there. You can call it a championship.
Right.
And then now I know that there's some logistics that goes into that, because I know like having teams fly all over the place for travel. I mean, I know it's tough, even though, I mean, this is a $300 million league just based off of buyouts. So I don't know, like, I get
Hector
that.
Said in his interview with Envoy, he was like, people are saying 25 million. He was like, it's more like 35 million. He's like, because the 25 million is the buy-in. He's like, but you have salaries and travel. And one of the reasons they couldn't have every team travel was because of how much more money. Like, if you think about the original schedule, these teams were traveling like 6 times this year.
Well, that's even worse. Like, so if your 25 million that you bought in doesn't go towards player salaries, then that's money that could have been spent for travel and hotels and food and stuff like that.
Right. That's true. So there's a good question in the chat that I want to answer. Somebody was asking about points. 10 points per win, and you get 10. Yeah, there you go. Easy Mac. You get 10 bonus points. So the most points you can get is 50. If you win the actual weekend, you get 50 points. And that's why I'm saying, with the 20 points that Atlanta has right now and the 20 points that Chicago has, they're going to go back and forth for months, getting 70 and then 120 and then 120 and then 190 and then 190 if they keep winning. And it's just going to be weird. It's going to be unique. But it also means, let me tell you what, if Atlanta gets upset in Atlanta, it's going to take them the rest of the season to catch up with Chicago in points. Like, that extra 10 points matters, but also that Minnesota event is going to matter to some of those teams. Like, somebody was saying, I don't know what I was watching. They were like, imagine if the Gorillas missed being a wild card team for champs by 10 points and they forfeited 10 points in Minnesota. That's how they feel. Like, imagine if it goes all the way back to that, and it's like, we missed this by 10 points. And we know Aches has been that close, where he had the 3-0 optic, which he did in 2016, and then won I think it was 2017, and then won the event. Or 2018, whatever year it was, he won champs. And then he won the event. Like, so it could be that close with these 10 points. It's going to be interesting as the season goes on, how we rate all of that.
I think like those top teams, I know that they'll be ping-ponging back and forth in terms of who has more points than the others, but when it comes down to it, like, somebody's going to be on one side of the bracket, another top team is going to be on the other side of the bracket. So I get that it's going to be ping-ponging back and forth. I just don't really think that it matters all that much, at least for like the top 5. Right outside of the top 5, once it gets lower than that, then it matters, because you want to end up, getting seeding and whatnot. But I just think for Atlanta and Chicago specifically, I get that, like, you can't really compare who is actually number one throughout the year. I don't know. I just don't think it matters all that much, because in the end, one's going to be on one side, one's going to be on the other, and they're probably going to meet in the grand finals. So
they will. So it'll matter to us. It won't matter to, because if you're a Chicago fan, you're gonna talk about the fact that my team is number one.
Right.
Like, even if, well, Atlanta wasn't there, bro.
That kind of keeps it interesting, to be honest. I mean, it allows
right.
all those fan bases to just talk at each other all year. Just nobody can really prove anything.
That's it. That's actually an interesting thought. Like you prove it. You haven't even played me.
Yeah, right. It just allows those fan bases to talk.
Well, and think about the storylines. If you expand on that Arcides and Pristini story, and they really don't play each other till May, and Pristini is hungry to beat his brother on land. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting. Okay, so we're almost done, guys. I guess the one question I'll throw at you, Icon, because I want to know your opinion. Do you think league play is going to happen? And do you think the spawns will change?
League play as in like online league play, like implementing it for everybody?
In-game. Yeah, in-game.
It better. I mean, at this point in time, like, so for me personally, I rushed up to, before season 1 came out, I rushed through and I was max ranked probably before like the vast majority of people. And then after that, like, I don't know, season 1, I think I'm like a 130 or something, but I just like don't feel like I have that much to play for. Whereas if there was a league play, I'll grind because I just want to, keep going up the ranks and stuff like that. Yeah. Will it happen? I think my guess would be that it'll be similar to what we had last year, where it'll just be a mid-season update and it'll finally come up. And then the problem is that by that time, interest is kind of down, right? I mean, by the time you get halfway through the year or 80% through the year, then okay, league plays here, that's great, but you've lost a lot of your player base. I don't know why these things just can't come out on launch. I feel like there'd be so many people, more people invested, even in the competitive scene, if league play was there all year. Mm-hmm. Like, imagine, some up and coming player who's like really good amongst all of his friends, and he wants to say, or he wants to be able to prove himself. Well, now he can hop into league play and then, go up the ranks. And now all of a sudden that person is way more invested in the competitive side of things than they would have been just grinding out pubs with his friends. So
there was people in Black Ops 2 that were beating Scumpy or whoever during their streams, and they kind of got recognized, like at that master level, in league play, and they were getting recognized because of what they were doing. What was your thoughts on the spawns?
And then spawns, I'll say, so I've done a couple of videos on like breaking down like the bad spawns in the game. So like this happens, which led to this, which led to a team getting a spawn that they shouldn't have, and it could kind of change the game. So I've done videos like that. I'm a little bit weary to keep doing them just because I don't want to keep like ragging on the game. But what I'll say is that I feel like spawns are pretty good in the majority of the maps. I think cave is a disaster. So Azir cave, I think there's just stuff happening all over the place. But I don't. So when I watch different games like on Hackney Yard and Gun Runner, and like I feel like it's pretty consistent. So I think they would be just best suited to just maybe take cave out for now until they can work on it a little bit. Because I actually in a Reddit post, I actually had a little conversation with Karma, and he pointed out another thing that I hadn't even seen. And he pointed out where like they spawned out when they maybe shouldn't have. Then like it just ended up going towards rotations. So, but every time that these come up, it's always on Azir cave. Now, of course, there's going to be a time or two here or there. There are so many interactions and there are so many deaths in Call of Duty with 5 men that there's going to be things that happen all the time. But the most blatant ones are on Azir cave. So yeah, they just need to work on that map, and I think it'll be pretty solid overall. Just because I don't see it on a lot of the other ones.
Okay, so I have 2 questions from Twitter that I got, and I will say my 2 cents is the same answer for both of those questions. League play will be delayed until they want to make it because they want new players, and the spawns will be delayed in fixing because of new players. It is so obvious that the spawns are made for people to not get spawn trapped, for teams to have random. You had one of your videos where, or maybe it was Karma that I don't remember. I thought it was one of your videos where there was like this random, everybody spawned at a different place. like one team entirely spawned all over the place. And it was like, how do you predict that? You know, and if you guys have paid attention on Twitter, Parasite's been very I can predict all the spawns. I can call all the spawns. I can, like, he finally admitted the other day that it is unfortunate because it's not completely possible to predict all of them. But he was saying it's easy to see why you guys spawned in this place and that place. But these are people that have been playing Call of Duty professionally for years, and they're mind blown by what's happening in game. But if I'm a developer, and I can tell you guys, as a Call of Duty mobile player that plays ranked all the time, because they launched COD Mobile with League Play. I had to get the new sniper that I got, the Locust. I had to grind my way up to Pro 2, which is one below the highest level in the game. And it was like, it was annoying because as you go up, you get, of course, placed against people that are just as good or at the same level, and it's like very skill based. But I wanted that freaking sniper so bad, I just kept grinding. And and if you lose matches, you lose points. I mean, it's the same thing. But if I'm a new player and I go into a ranked match, once I get to about the top level of veteran, which is like the second, tier, I wouldn't go any farther than that. And I have people that try to play with me on stream, and I can't play ranked because they're not higher than that. And it's just like, well, it's the same for League Play. I think you can't play with all of your friends. No, COD Mobile launched with BR, Molly. There's supposed to still be a BR for Modern Warfare, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. All right, so let me ask these two questions. So Icon, the first one is, this is from Sarcasm718 on Twitter. I forget his name in the chat, but he's in the chat. I'm a big fan of Hook, but is he overhyped, or is he not as good of a player anymore? Will he ever be that player again? Do you think he's a championship caliber player? What are your thoughts? I'll let you go first.
So again, what I talk from is basically like statistics, like how they perform in matches and games and stuff like that. He hasn't shown it necessarily yet. It seems like, when he came over from the Halo scene, everybody just thought he would be the next greatest things, and his ability to transfer from back to one game to the other, and everybody talked about it. Right. We don't have a lot to pull from yet, just in terms of this game, but Dallas's whole team played bad. I do think that he'll be kind of like one of those mid-tier serviceable players. I don't think he's going to be the simp for Dallas. I just don't see. No, I haven't seen flashes like that from him. Whereas, like, if you go watch Envoy play, he'll pull off 8 kills in a row, and you'll be like, "Whoa!" Whereas with Hugh, like he's normally like like an even KD player or a 1.1 or something. But his performance at Minnesota, now again, it was against the best team, so who really knows? But I don't think that he'll ever be that standout, that MVP, that all-star player. But I do think that he'll be serviceable. Like if there was a challengers team for Dallas, they're not going to replace him, right? It's not like he's going to be replaced, but he's not going to be the star. In order for Dallas to succeed, my personal thoughts is that it has to come from Illy and Shotzi. I think Hugh just kind of plays like the karma role, just goes about his business and just kind of provides for the team. But I don't see him getting replaced. I don't see him being an all-star. He's just, for me, he'll always be just kind of that third out of 5 player somewhere in there.
I think that the best recipe for that Dallas team is for all 3 of the young players to fry, and for Clayster and for Krim to be a turret, and for Clayster to be giving gas to everybody and not losing too many gunfights on rotation and things like that. I feel like if Illy and Shotzi step up and do great, I think it'll only expose more of Hook's greatness. And is he gonna be an envoy or like the number 1 player on that team? Maybe not. But he can have a better impact than he's having. Who he's one of those players that he's still young. And he's one of those players that can follow a lead very well. That's why I think he works well within that NBA organization. I think he can follow the lead of these players that he's with, like the Crims and the Claysters that have multiple rings, championships. Crim's the winningest player in terms of championships in the game. I think Hook can follow along with that and do great. And Hook is like a Beasley who is great, but will always get overshadowed by someone like Simp. Now, this year, Molly, Simp may be overshadowed by two people on his team, with a Beasley being one of them. We'll see.
Cellium.
Yeah, Cellium is great. And pro players are calling a Beasley one of the top 3 players in this game, with Arcides, and I forget who they said the other person was.
And he had a terrible launch weekend.
Yeah. And he's claiming that his controller wasn't turning fast enough. He was the weakest on his team, but you're weakest on his team, and and they fry everybody. I'm scared of what Atlanta's going to do in Atlanta. All right, second question. Go ahead.
I will say just real quick that Empire Hugh has the option, or it's going to be there where he can, they're going to play Seattle. They're going to play Chicago. They're probably going to make that final. So he's going to have the opportunity to prove that,
right.
Are you going to be able to put up or not? So in that first weekend, it was kind of stacked against him, but he's going to be playing some of those middle tier teams, at least in my view. So we'll see if he puts up or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to your point, Molly, if you think about Simp and Abeezy last year, and even Simp will say having Abeezy on his team gives him confidence, and having him last year gave him confidence. And if Simp was an MVP in those 2 events, it would have been Abeezy. It's like when Shaq and Kobe were together. Kobe got all of the attention, but without Shaq, it wouldn't have happened. Yes, Kobe won chips without him. Shaq won a chip without him, but it's like Kobe was the shiner. He was the shinier one. He had the flashier plays. He's dunking on people and doing crazy stuff. But Shaq did the dirty work and was the most unstoppable center that we had ever seen up to that point.
Sim's getting the 3 pieces and S&D rounds and stuff like that. Sniping.
Exactly. Yes. And when you get that, I don't care if you've had a horrible event. That's what our esport is great for. It's like, Sim is amazing. But he had
so don't go
8.
third person and search.
Oh, please don't. What's up, Jonesy? All right. So the last question is, do you think jet lag or time zone changes will make a big impact on the younger players who have never traveled overseas before, like Illy Shotzi and those guys? I'll answer first. Yes, depending on how early they go. They were in Minnesota Tuesday, I think, to do shooting and then to get some game time in. I think if teams go a week in advance, like at least 5 days, they should be fine. These guys are professionals at adjusting their sleep schedule when necessary, because they travel for a living, and they have a gamer schedule already that's awkward. I think it could have a slight impact, but I don't think it's going to be enough of an impact to change the outcome of any of our predictions, if that makes sense.
For me, I think it could. And if I'm looking at this and I'm seeing a lot of these guys scrimming right now and streaming their scrims, like, I don't know. So think about it. If there was an NFL game, if the Super Bowl was being played in London, those teams would already be there. Right. So we're not that far away. You're only 4 days away as of, when today ends.
Yeah. So I think they're traveling tomorrow, right? Probably.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe that's enough of a time. I don't know. I know that it can absolutely take a toll. I do think it's an advantage for London and Paris already kind of being on that schedule. Like, think about it. If you're Seattle, you're going to, so like you personally, Kingdom, you're going to have to wake up at 3:30 to watch these matches, 3:30 in the morning.
I'll probably stop streaming at that time
because it's 6:30 for me. So if you're Seattle, I mean, that's a tall task there. I do think that it could, but if I'm one of these pro orgs, I want to get there as soon as I can to try to adjust all that.
I agree. And that's where VOD matters. Before we close out the show, like, I've been very impressed with the numbers. I don't know if it was you, Easy Mac, that tweeted it out, but I'm very impressed with the numbers. Almost each individual day is at 1 million views. And that's on YouTube. And then the individual matches are in upwards of 300,000-400,000 when you look at the Chicago Dallas match or Atlanta Dallas, like, and so YouTube is doing a great job with viewership. I think Twitch has done a great job in the past as well, but VOD viewership was not the same. You're gonna get way more like video on demand viewers on YouTube with this being streamed on YouTube. We're talking in the, I mean, I might do the math and make a video on it, because we're probably talking about 3 to 4 million views since a week and a half ago. Like, that's crazy. And so I feel like even if I don't wake up at 3:30 in the morning, one of the first things I'm doing when I do wake up is I'm turning to YouTube, because they put the VODs out within minutes of each match. Yep. I'm turning on YouTube and I'm watching VODs immediately, like literally immediately. So that's just, I think the YouTube move is proving to be beneficial right now. I think the presentation live is not as good, but the after presentation, when you can upgrade it to 1080p and all this kind of stuff, and you can cut out specific matches and you can watch them, it's amazing, and it's going to be great. All right. Yeah. Easy Mac, I don't know what's happened to all those shows. I don't know. All the shows they used to do last year, the MLG did, that had like Benson and Merc hosting and
it'd be great.
Maven. If they want to do shows like that, they know my number. It's so funny, and I'll tell you guys this because I think it's hilarious. I sat here thinking about bringing back a podcast. I'm so happy that I found Icon, because you're a great duo, man.
Thanks, man. You are.
I honestly sat here and I was like, I should hit up Puckett. Like, I know this dude probably wants to do a podcast. And then when he announced that he was doing a podcast with Big Timer, I was like, I missed an opportunity. 100% missing. He wouldn't have turned it down. Like, we would have done a great show together. And people call me a detriment for my knowledge. I'm like, Big Timer, even though he was a pro player, knows less than me about the current state of Call of Duty. And so, and that's not a diss or anything. That just means he just stopped paying attention for many, many, many years. I did for like 3, but I watched Call of Duty all the years when I wasn't uploading. I'm a fan, to the point where I would not make videos just so that I could watch competitive Call of Duty. I was watching TP play freaking Blackout this morning. Like, I just love COD. So anyway, I'm happy though that I found Icon, and you guys, man, great stream again. We had a great stream last week. We are going to do a recap show next Monday, same time. I believe it's going to be produced as well by Goalie. Goalie is the real MVP. All the stuff you see on screen, all of
makes
our
it so much easier.
All we got to do is turn on a camera and talk, and it's amazing. I almost feel like I'm back on the sticks, but it's just something different, and it's cool. And Icon, I think has kind of pledged being here. And so I'm just excited for this year of competitive Call of Duty, and the opportunities we have to talk about it. I just love talking about it. Like, I could talk about this forever. I thank all of you guys and all the follows. Thank you, Molly, for your Twitch Prime sub. And thank you, Phantom, for your tier 1 2 months. I appreciate you guys. I have 4 new emotes. You can see some of them. Thank you, Easy Mac, for that follow you just hit. I have some of them I have 4 new emotes, but the other 2 are coming. So I have 6 total since I've reached 20. I think I have 27 subscribers right now on the channel. And if you guys want to see some Call of Duty Mobile, check it out. If you want to see some breakdowns of some awesome scrims and some good videos, check out Icon's channel. And if you want to see a really good PC Modern Warfare player, follow Goalie stream. I host it most of the time. Goalie I was wildly entertained by his Modern Warfare gameplay the other day. But nevertheless, guys, this is your boy Kingdom and Icon. We will see you guys next Monday or on our channels throughout the week. And we're both excited. I'm sure he's going to come out with lots of videos leading up to the event, and I am too. And we'll see you guys in the chat this weekend. Peace out.
Yes, sir. See you guys.